The gambling hall stank of methane and poor decisions. Captain Vorkath of the Klendari supremacy leaned back in his hover seat, all four of his arms spread wide, in a gesture that screamed confidence. His scales rippled with the iridescent purple that his species displayed when they thought they had won something. Around the table, 6 other beings from various corners of the galaxy watched with varying degrees of interest as the human female across from him calmly arranged her cards. "You know what your problem is, human?" Vorkath's translator rendered his words with a sneer that needed no technological assistance. "Your entire species operates on probability manipulation. You call it luck. We call it cheating." The human, who had introduced herself simply as Reyna Cross, didn't look up from her cards. Her fingers, those strange 5-digited appendages that seemed so fragile compared to the claws and tentacles around the table, moved with practiced precision. "That's a fascinating theory," she said, her voice carrying that peculiar dry quality that humans employed when they were about to make someone look foolish. "Care to wager on it?" The Klendari captain's breathing vents flared. Around the table, the other players shifted. There was Gromnik, a Thaloxian, whose rocky exterior made him look like an ambulatory boulder with eyes. Next to him sat Lithis, a serpentine whose coils wrapped around her chair 3 times. The twins, Jacko and Jenna from the mercantile fleet, both blue-skinned Calvorians with matching cybernetic implants. And then there was old Torvus, a Grendelkin who had been playing cards in this hall longer than most species had known about interstellar travel. "Wager!" Vorkath's laugh was like rocks tumbling down a mountain. "Human, I have watched your kind stumble through every challenge the galaxy has thrown at you. You shouldn't have survived First Contact. You definitely shouldn't have survived the Proxima Wars. And yet, here you are, spreading through space like some kind of persistent fungus. It's not skill, it's not intelligence, it's probability manipulation. Somehow, against all mathematical likelihood, you people keep winning." Reyna finally looked up. Her eyes were brown, unremarkable by most galactic standards, but there was something in them that made Vorkath's scales itch. Humans had that effect sometimes, a prey species that somehow acted like predators, weak creatures that refused to acknowledge their weakness. "So you're saying we're lucky?" she asked. "I'm saying you cheat. The universe itself seems to bend around your species. It's disgusting, honestly." Vorkath tossed 3 crystalline credit chips into the center of the table. The holographic display above them updated the pot. "But here, in this hall, the luck dampeners are active. Anti-probability fields running at full capacity. Whatever cosmic nonsense protects your species out there doesn't work in here. This is pure skill, pure chance, pure mathematics. Is that so?" Reyna matched his bet and raised it, her face betraying nothing. "Then you should have no problem beating me." "Oh, I'll do more than beat you, human. I'll humiliate you. When I'm done, everyone in this sector will know that humans are nothing without their probability manipulation. You'll slink back to your little corner of space, and maybe, just maybe, develop some actual abilities instead of relying on cosmic cheating." Torvus, who had been silent until now, let out a low rumble. "Captain, perhaps we should focus on the game?" "The game?" Vorkath slammed one of his hands on the table, making the chips rattle. "This is about the game, old one. This is about showing the galaxy what humans really are when you strip away their advantages. Did you know that human ships have a 47% higher survival rate in combat than the statistical models predict? 47%. Their soldiers survive wounds that should kill them. Their diplomats succeed at negotiations that should fail. Their explorers return from expeditions that should end in death. It's not natural. Reyna's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those brown eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or was it something more dangerous? "You've done your research," she said quietly. "I'm impressed. Most people just call us lucky and move on. You've actually studied it." "Of course I've studied it. Do you know how many battles I've fought against human forces? How many times I've had the perfect ambush, the perfect strategy, only to have some impossibly unlikely event turn the tide? A solar flare at exactly the right moment. A navigation error that puts a human ship exactly where it needs to be. A computer glitch that favors them precisely when it matters most." Vorkath's voice rose with each sentence. "But not here. Not in this game. Not tonight." "Then let's play," Reyna said, placing her cards face down. "But first, let's make this interesting. Real interesting." The Calvorian twins leaned forward in unison. Jocko spoke first. "Define interesting." "I propose a modification to our wagers." Reyna pulled out a data chip and slid it across the table. "My ship, a genuine Earth-built vessel, custom-modified, worth approximately, let's call it 2 million credits. Against Captain Vorkath's ship, the Decimator. According to public records, roughly the same value." The gambling hall, which had maintained a steady hum of background noise, went suddenly, dramatically quiet. Even the methane recyclers seemed to pause. Vorkath's scales rippled through several colors before settling on a deep red. "You want to bet ships? Unless you're scared?" Reyna's smile was small, barely there, but it carried the weight of a challenge that no Klendari warrior could ignore. "I'm not scared of a human who's about to lose everything she owns." "Then we have a deal. One hand, winner takes both ships. Pure skill, pure chance, no probability manipulation. Just cards, mathematics, and nerve." Gromnik's rocky features somehow managed to look concerned. "Reyna, are you certain about this? That's your only ship. Your livelihood." "I'm certain." She never looked away from Vorkath. "The captain here has been making quite the argument about human limitations. I think it's time we tested his theory properly." Torvis gestured with one massive paw. "I'll stand as witness for the House. This wager is binding under Galactic Commercial Code. Both parties understand the terms?" "Crystal clear," Vorkath said. His confidence had returned, flooding through his voice like poison through water. "Finally, we'll see what a human is worth when the cosmic thumb isn't on the scales." "Oh, Captain," Reyna said softly, "you're going to learn something tonight. Just maybe not what you think." The dealer, a 6-armed hexapod whose species had been running gambling establishments since before Earth had developed writing, began shuffling with the kind of flourish that came from centuries of practice. The cards, made from compressed stellar material that was impossible to mark or manipulate, flew through the air in patterns too complex for most beings to follow. Lithis uncoiled slightly. "Traditional rules? 5-card draw? Standard galactic deck?" "Standard rules," Reyna confirmed. "No wild cards, no special modifications, just the game as it's meant to be played." The hexapod dealer distributed the cards with mechanical precision, 5 to each player still in the hand. Most of the others had folded early, sensing that something bigger than a normal game was unfolding. Now it was just Vorkath and Reyna, facing each other across an expanse of table that suddenly seemed vast as space itself. Vorkath picked up his cards, and his scales immediately flushed with deeper purple. A good hand, then. Maybe a great one. Reyna picked up hers with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout. Her fingers didn't tremble. Her breathing didn't change. She simply looked at her cards, then at Vorkath, then back at her cards. "The beauty of this game," Vorkath said, unable to keep the smugness from his voice, "is that it's been mathematically analyzed by every major civilization. We know the odds. We know the probabilities. There's no room for your species' cosmic manipulation here. Just numbers. Just chance. Just the cold reality of mathematics." "You're absolutely right," Reyna agreed. "Mathematics don't lie. And my mathematics say I'm holding something special." Vorkath spread his cards slightly, just enough for himself to confirm what he already knew. "Tell me, human, do you know the odds of being dealt a natural 4 of a kind?" "Roughly 0.024%, Reyna said without hesitation. "Approximately 424 to 1 against." Vorkath's eyes widened slightly. "You know your numbers." "I know lots of things, Captain. For instance, I know that the Klendari supremacy has been having budget problems. Your military is overextended. You've lost 3 major contracts in the last quarter. Your crew hasn't been paid in 6 weeks. She tilted her head. "Which makes me wonder, can you actually afford to lose your ship?" "I won't be losing anything." But there was a crack in Vorkath's voice now. Just a hairline fracture in all that confidence. "Discards," the dealer announced. "How many cards?" "None," Vorkath said immediately. "I'll play these." Around the table, those still watching exchanged glances. Playing the hand as dealt meant either incredible confidence or incredible stupidity. With Vorkath's earlier reaction, it had to be confidence. He had to be holding something powerful. "And you, human?" Reyna looked at her cards again, her expression still maddeningly neutral. The seconds stretched. The gambling hall's air recyclers hummed. Somewhere in the back, someone dropped a glass, and it shattered with a sound like tiny bells. "I'll take," Reyna said slowly. 2 cards." She discarded 2 cards face down, and the dealer slid her 2 new ones with practiced ease. She picked them up, integrated them into her hand, and her expression didn't change even a fraction. "Final wagers," the dealer announced. "All in," Vorkath said immediately. "My ship, my crew, my honor, everything on the table right now." "Called," Reyna said simply. "Show your hand, Captain." Vorkath spread his cards with a flourish that used all 4 arms. "4 sovereigns! Quad sovereigns! Human! Do you know the power of this hand? The probability? The pure mathematical beauty?" He was right to be excited. 4 sovereigns, the second highest cards in the galactic deck, all in one hand. The odds of beating it were astronomical. You would need either a natural 5 of a kind, which was theoretically impossible with a standard deck, or a very specific straight flush. The serpentine sequence, they called it, the 10 through ace of the same suit. The odds of getting that with a 2-card draw were, well, they were numbers that most sentient beings couldn't even comprehend. Around the table, even the veterans looked impressed. Torvis nodded slowly. Gromnik's rocky features arranged themselves into something approximating respect. The Calvorian twins both sucked in breath through their respiratory slits. "That's quite a hand," Reyna acknowledged. "Really, truly impressive. You weren't lying about the mathematics, Captain. That's a hand that wins probably 99.98% of the time." 99.987%, Vorkath corrected, his scales now glowing so brightly purple they were almost white. "I didn't just study probability manipulation, human. I studied probability itself, and the probability says I've won. So show me your pathetic hand so we can finish this farce." Reyna laid down her cards one at a time. First card, 10 of nebulas. Vorkath's glow dimmed just slightly. Second card, Knight of nebulas. His scales flickered. Third card, Queen of nebulas. The glow was definitely fading now. Fourth card, King of nebulas. The gambling hall was so quiet you could hear the electrons buzzing in the lighting fixtures. Fifth card, Ace of nebulas. The serpentine sequence, 10 through Ace, all nebulas. The only hand in the entire deck that could beat quad sovereigns. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The universe itself seemed to pause to appreciate the profound unlikelihood of what had just happened. Then Vorkath exploded to his feet, all four arms gesturing wildly. "No! No! The odds! The probability! That's impossible! You drew 2 cards and pulled exactly the 2 you needed for the only hand that could beat mine. The mathematics don't support it. The universe doesn't allow it." "And yet," Reyna said, standing slowly, gathering the chips toward her. "Here we are. The dampeners were running. You confirmed it yourself. No probability manipulation. No cosmic cheating. Just cards, mathematics, and nerve. Exactly what you wanted." You must have." Vorkath was cycling through colors now, purple to red to a sickly green. "The deck was marked. The dealer was bribed. You cheated," Reyna finished for him. Her smile was wider now, and there was something in it that made even the bravest gamblers at adjacent tables shift uncomfortably. "That's a serious accusation, Captain. Torvus, as house witness, did you observe any irregularities?" The old Grendelkin shook his massive head. The deck was standard. The dealer was neutral. The dampeners were active. By all measures, this was a legitimate game. "But the odds!" Vorkath was almost screaming now. "The probability of drawing exactly those 2 cards." "Is low," Reyna agreed. "Very, very low. But not 0, Captain. Never 0. You studied probability, but you forgot the most important lesson. Unlikely doesn't mean impossible. It just means unlikely." She walked around the table, and despite being perhaps a third of Vorkath's size, despite being from a species he had just spent the evening disparaging, she somehow seemed larger, more dangerous. "You want to know the real difference between humans and most other species?" she asked quietly. "It's not probability manipulation. It's not cosmic cheating. It's not even luck, though luck certainly helps." "Then what is it?" Vorkath's voice was hollow now, the voice of someone watching their world collapse. "We believe in the unlikely. When you calculate odds and see 0.0001%, you see impossible. When we see it, we see a chance. A small one, sure. Microscopic even. But a chance. And we've learned, over centuries of being the underdogs, of being the prey species that refused to die, of being told we couldn't possibly survive. We've learned that if you take enough unlikely chances, eventually, some of them pan out." She picked up the data chip that represented ownership of Vorkath's ship. "I didn't cheat, Captain. I didn't manipulate anything. I just played the game, and I won. Fair, clean, exactly like you wanted. The house has the recordings, the dampeners were active, and the deck was standard. This was pure chance, pure mathematics, pure skill." "Then how?" It was barely a whisper. Reyna's smile turned sharp. "Because I've been counting cards since the first hand was dealt 3 hours ago. Because I knew exactly what was left in the deck when we got to this final hand. Because I calculated the odds of you having something good enough to go all in, and I calculated the odds of me drawing what I needed, and I determined that those odds, while extremely low, were better than any odds I'd get anywhere else." She leaned in close. I didn't need luck, Captain. I had math. Real math. Not the math of what's probable, but the math of what's possible. You wanted to prove humans are nothing without probability manipulation? Congratulations. You just got beaten by pure human skill instead. The dealer cleared his throat, a sound like gravel shifting. Captain Vorkath, according to the wager, your vessel now belongs to Miss Cross. You have 24 hours to remove your personal effects and transfer command codes. Vorkath stood there, all four arms hanging limp, his scales fading to a dull gray that spoke of shock and defeat. Around the gambling hall, whispers had started, growing into a murmur, building into excited conversation. This would be a story told for years, decades maybe. The human who beat quad sovereigns with a two-card draw. "Watch me win clean, you said," Vorkath muttered. "You told me you'd win clean." "And I did." Reyna pocketed the data chip. "No tricks, no manipulation, no cheating, just a human playing cards. Maybe that's scarier than probability manipulation, Captain. Maybe the universe doesn't need to bend around us. Maybe we're just stubborn enough, crazy enough, to make the 1 in a million shots, because we're the only species that even tries." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and, Captain? That 47% survival rate you mentioned? The improbable victories? The unlikely successes? Here's something to think about as you figure out your next career move. What if it's not the universe bending? What if we're just really, really good at calculating which impossible odds are worth taking? What if every time you thought we cheated, we were just playing a game you didn't fully understand?" She walked toward the exit, her new ship's ownership chip resting comfortably in her pocket. Behind her, Vorkath stood frozen, and all around the gambling hall, beings from dozens of species were looking at humanity just a little bit differently than they had an hour before. At the door, Reyna stopped one more time and called back, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "Same time next week, Captain? I could use a new crew, and you're about to need a new job. I pay well, the benefits are decent, and I promise there's never a dull moment working for a species that the universe supposedly bends around. Think about it." Then she was gone, out into the neon-soaked streets of the station, leaving behind a gambling hall full of beings who were rapidly recalculating everything they thought they knew about humans. Torvus chuckled, a sound like mountains laughing. "She counted cards for 3 hours and set up that final hand. That's dedication." "Humans!" Gromnik rumbled. "They'll gamble on anything, even mathematics." "Especially mathematics," Lithis corrected, coiling tighter around her chair. "That's what makes them dangerous." And Vorkath, captain of nothing now, could only stand and wonder if perhaps he had been asking the wrong questions all along. Maybe it wasn't about whether humans cheated. Maybe it was about understanding that when you played against a species that had spent its entire existence being told what was impossible, you were playing against beings who had built their entire civilization on proving the impossible wrong. Outside, Reyna Cross walked through the station toward her new ship, formerly the Decimator, already making mental calculations about crew requirements and trade routes and which impossible odds she might tackle next. Because that's what humans did. They looked at the universe, saw all the ways it could kill them, calculated the odds of survival, and then did it anyway. And sometimes, just sometimes, the 1 in a million shot came through. Not because of probability manipulation, not because of luck, but because someone had been crazy enough to take the shot in the first place. The docking bay of Station Helix 9 smelled like ozone and regret when Reyna Cross arrived to claim her prize. The decimator hung in its berth like a metal predator, all sharp angles and military-grade plating. Klendari design philosophy favored intimidation over elegance, and this ship delivered on that promise. Weapon ports bristled along its hull, and the engine configuration suggested it could outrun most patrol vessels in 3 sectors. Not bad for a night's work. You actually came. The voice echoed through the empty bay, and Reyna turned to find Vorkath standing in the shadow of his former command. Without the gambling hall's atmospheric lighting, he looked smaller somehow. Deflated. His scales had settled into a muted gray-blue that suggested resignation. "Of course I came. We had a deal." Reyna approached slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. Even defeated, a Klendari warrior could be dangerous if they felt cornered. 24 hours, you said. I'm giving you the full time." How generous. The sarcasm was there, but weaker than before. Vorkath gestured toward the ship with one of his lower arms. "The crew has been paid what we could scrape together. They've already transferred to other vessels, or taken transport off station. Except for one." "Oh?" A figure emerged from the decimator's cargo ramp. Human. Female. Shorter than Reyna, with close-cropped silver hair, and the kind of scars that told stories about hard lessons learned the expensive way. She wore a mechanic's jumpsuit stained with a rainbow of different fluids, none of them easily identifiable. "Name's Harper Vale," the woman said, extending a hand that Reyna shook carefully. Strong grip. Confident. "I've been the decimator's chief engineer for 3 years. Captain here says I should probably look for new employment. But I figured I'd meet the infamous card shark who took down the great Vorkath first." "Infamous already?" "Girl, the entire station knows. Half the mercantile fleet is buying drinks, and the other half is trying to figure out if you're selling lessons." Harper grinned, and it transformed her scarred face into something almost mischievous. "I watched the security footage. That was art, what you did. Cold, calculated, beautiful art." "Security footage is public?" "The House released it. Probably the best advertising they've had in decades. Nothing brings in gamblers like watching the impossible happen." Harper jerked a thumb toward the ship. "So, new boss, you keeping her name? The decimator has a certain reputation in some circles. Opens doors. Also closes them sometimes. But that's situational." Reyna considered the ship, its aggressive lines and battle-worn hull. "What's her actual condition? And I want the truth, not the sales pitch." Harper's grin widened. "Oh, I like you already. Actual condition is she's a brutal piece of Klendari over-engineering that could probably survive a direct hit from a plasma torpedo if you angled the shields right. Engines are solid. Weapons systems are excessive, but functional. Life support is robust, if you don't mind everything smelling vaguely of methane. The main computer has a personality subroutine that's borderline sentient and deeply sarcastic, but you get used to it. She's a mean ship built by mean people to do mean things, and she does them very, very well." "Sounds perfect." "Yeah, thought you might say that." Harper pulled a data slate from her pocket. "Here's the thing, though. I've been maintaining this beast since she rolled out of the Klendari shipyards. I know every system, every quirk, every time she makes a noise that sounds wrong but is actually fine. You're going to need an engineer who understands her, and frankly, finding someone else who speaks both Klendari engineering languages and actually likes working on their overcomplicated systems is going to be harder than winning that card game. You want to stay on? I want to work for someone who can stare down a Klendari battle captain and take his ship with nothing but mathematical probability and massive steel nerves. Yeah, I want to stay on. Plus, watching Vorkath's face when he realizes his best engineer switched sides will be worth at least 3 months' salary all by itself. Behind them, Vorkath made a sound like a deflating balloon. Traitor. Don't be dramatic, sir. You lost the ship in a fair game. She owns it now. I'm just being practical. Harper's tone softened slightly. Besides, you can't pay me anyway. The Supremacy's accounts are frozen pending that diplomatic incident at Rigel Station. You were going to have to let me go within the week regardless. Still feels like betrayal. Feels like survival, Harper corrected. Something humans are apparently very good at. Which brings me to a question for our new captain here. She turned back to Reyna. What's the plan? You strike me as someone who doesn't win ships just to add them to a collection. You've got something in mind? Reyna walked up the cargo ramp, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. The interior of the decimator was all function over form, but there was a certain beauty in the efficient brutality of its design. Control conduits ran along exposed ceiling panels. Weapon locker doors lined the corridor. Everything was built to be accessed quickly, repaired in combat, modified on the fly. I've been running small cargo operations for 5 years, Reyna said, running her hand along a bulkhead. Legal stuff, mostly. Sometimes dancing on the edge of legal. Never anything that would get me killed, but never anything particularly exciting either. Safe, predictable. Profitable enough to keep flying, but not enough to really grow. Sounds boring. It was, but it was smart. I was gathering data, learning routes, building contacts, and most importantly, studying the major players in this sector. She turned to face Harper and Vorkath, who had followed them up the ramp. The Klendari Supremacy, the Thaloxian Consortium, the Mercantile Fleet, all the big organizations that control trade, territory, and resources. You know what I learned? Harper crossed her arms. What? They're all operating on outdated models. They calculate risk using old equations. They avoid certain routes because the math says they're too dangerous. They pass on certain contracts because the probability of success doesn't meet their thresholds. They're all playing it safe, making decisions based on what's likely rather than what's possible. That's generally considered wise, Vorkath interjected, his voice bitter. Unlike gambling away your ship. Is it, though? Reyna challenged. The galaxy is changing, Captain. New jump points opening up, old territories shifting, technology advancing. But all these big organizations, they're stuck in their mathematical models, their probability matrices, their risk assessment protocols. They see danger and stop. Humans see danger and ask, how badly do we want what's on the other side? Harper's eyes had taken on a gleam that suggested she was following this logic to its natural conclusion. You're planning to hit the routes they won't touch. Not just hit them. Dominate them. There's a shipping corridor through the Thornback Nebula that every major fleet avoids because the radiation plays havoc with navigation systems. 43 ships have tried it in the last decade. Only 12 made it through intact. The odds are terrible. So, naturally, you want to try it? I want to master it. The Thornback connects 3 major trade hubs, and the normal route around it adds 6 days to transport time. 6 days. Do you know how much companies would pay for a reliable transport that could cut that time? Vorkath's scales flickered with reluctant interest. The radiation would fry most navigation computers within hours. Most computers, yes. But the decimator has military-grade shielding and redundant systems. And I happen to know that Harper here, Reyna gestured to the engineer, published a paper 3 years ago on jury-rigging civilian vessels to survive high radiation environments. It was buried in some obscure technical journal that nobody reads. But I found it. Read it. Understood about 30% of it, honestly. But the conclusion was clear. It's possible, difficult, expensive, risky, but possible. Harper's expression had shifted from interested to fascinated. You read my paper? I read everything I can get my hands on. Information is the ultimate edge. While Vorkath was studying human probability manipulation, I was studying everyone. Learning who knows what, who can do what, what's considered impossible versus what's actually impossible. And your paper suggested something that nobody else has seriously attempted. Because the failure rate is astronomical. 68% failure rate, to be precise, which means 32% success rate. Those are terrible odds for most people. But for someone who just hit a 0.013% probability draw in a card game, Reyna smiled. Those odds look downright comfortable. Vorkath had moved closer, drawn into the conversation despite himself. His tactical mind, trained through decades of military service, was clearly working through the logistics. Even if you could navigate the Thornback reliably, you'd need contracts, clients willing to trust an unknown captain with valuable cargo, insurance that covers high-risk routes, legal clearances from 3 different jurisdictional authorities. Already working on it. I've got contacts at Meridian Trading who've been complaining about the Thornback detour for years. They're willing to give me a test run with low-value cargo to prove the concept. If I succeed, they'll contract for regular shipments. As for insurance, there's a Grendelkin syndicate that specializes in high-risk policies. They'll cover me, though the premiums are brutal. And the legal clearances. She pulled out her data slate. Already filed. Humans have this wonderful advantage in galactic bureaucracy. Everyone thinks we're too stupid to navigate the regulations properly, so they don't look too closely at our paperwork. Harper laughed, a sharp bark of sound. Underestimation as a tactical advantage. I love it. It served us well throughout history. Let others think we're lucky, or stupid, or blessed by probability manipulation. Meanwhile, we're actually doing the math, running the numbers, and taking calculated risks that everyone else is too scared to attempt. You'll die in that nebula, Vorkath said, but there was less conviction in his voice now. The radiation levels alone can be managed with proper shielding, navigation by dead reckoning, and stellar cartography, rather than computer systems, and a pilot willing to trust their training over their instruments when the electronics start acting weird. Reyna met his eyes. I'm not going into this blind, Captain. I've studied every failed attempt. I know what killed those other ships. Mostly, they panicked when their systems started failing. They tried to turn back, got disoriented, ran into debris fields or radiation pockets they could have avoided. They let fear override their training. And you won't? I didn't panic when I was staring at your quad sovereigns, did I? I calculated, I adapted, I executed. Same principle, different environment. The universe doesn't care about fear. It only cares about physics, and physics can be understood, modeled, predicted. Not perfectly, not always, but well enough to survive if you're smart and prepared. The 3 of them stood in the cargo bay of the Decimator, an unlikely trio united by circumstances that would have seemed impossible just 24 hours earlier. A human captain who had won a ship through mathematical audacity. A Klendari warrior who had lost everything to probability's cruel precision. An engineer caught between 2 worlds, choosing the one that promised chaos over certainty. I have a proposition. Reyna said finally. Harper, I want you as my chief engineer. Standard salary plus hazard bonuses for dangerous routes. You'll have full authority over ship modifications and maintenance budgets. I trust your expertise because you've proven it. Done. Where do I sign? And Captain Vorkath. Reyna turned to the Klendari, who stiffened at being addressed. I meant what I said at the gambling hall. I need a crew, and you need employment. More than that, you've got military experience, tactical training, and knowledge of this sector that I lack. I could use a first officer who understands combat operations and security protocols. The silence that followed was profound. Vorkath's scales cycled through several colors, emotions playing across his features too quickly to catalogue. Disbelief, anger, consideration, something that might have been desperate hope. You want me to serve under you? After everything I said? After I accused your entire species of cheating? You weren't entirely wrong, you know. Humans do have an uncanny survival rate. We do succeed against unlikely odds more often than statistics suggest we should. You just misunderstood why. Reyna stepped closer. It's not probability manipulation. It's perspective. Every other species in the galaxy looks at long odds and sees impossibility. We look at long odds and see opportunity. That's not cheating. That's philosophy. I called you a cosmic fungus. You did. That was rude. But you were also desperate, frustrated, and watching your whole world crumble because the supremacy made strategic errors that had nothing to do with humanity. You lashed out at a convenient target. I get it. Doesn't mean I liked it, but I get it. Vorkath's scales had settled into a confused purple-gray. Why would you offer me this? I have nothing. No ship, no crew, no future. I'm a liability. You're experienced. You know combat tactics that could keep us alive when things get dangerous, and they will get dangerous. Plus, Reyna's smile turned wry. Having a Klendari first officer sends a message. It says we're not just some reckless human operation. It says we're professional enough to attract military-trained personnel. Opens doors in certain markets. Using my reputation? Using your skills. The reputation is just a bonus. So, what do you say, Captain? Want to find out if humans really are as lucky as you think? Or do you want to learn that maybe, just maybe, we're simply better at calculating which impossible odds are worth the gamble? The old Klendari warrior looked at his former ship, at the human engineer who had already decided to jump ship, at the woman who had taken everything from him and was now offering him a chance to rebuild. His tactical mind was clearly running scenarios, calculating odds, weighing options. What's the salary? Competitive, plus performance bonuses if we succeed on high-risk runs, and full transparency on all operations. I don't keep secrets from my first officer. Benefits? Medical, life insurance, profit sharing on successful contracts, and the knowledge that you'll never be bored. I can promise excitement, danger, and the opportunity to do things that everyone else thinks are impossible. Vorkath's breathing vents flared. Then, slowly, reluctantly, but with growing conviction, he extended one of his upper hands. I want it documented that I still think humans manipulate probability somehow. But I also want to understand how you do it. And if serving under you gives me that insight, then perhaps there's value in this arrangement. Reyna shook his hand, sealing the deal. Fair enough. Welcome aboard, First Officer. Your first assignment is to help Harper inventory our weapon systems and determine what modifications we'll need for the Thornback run. I want a full tactical assessment by tomorrow evening. I can do that. Something had shifted in Vorkath's posture. Purpose, maybe. Direction. The depression that had clouded him since losing the card game was lifting, replaced by the focused energy of a warrior with a mission. When do we leave? 48 hours. I've got cargo contracts to finalize, supplies to load, and clearances to triple-check. Harper, can you have the radiation shielding upgrades completed in that time? The engineer was already pulling up schematics on her data slate. If I skip sleep and mainline stimulants, maybe. It'll be expensive, though. Those specialized shield generators don't come cheap. Money from the cargo contracts will cover it. And if we succeed on this first run, we'll have enough capital to really outfit this ship properly. Better sensors, upgraded weapons, maybe even some of those experimental jump drives the Calvorian engineers have been developing. Ambitious, Vorkath observed. You're planning to grow this operation significantly. I'm planning to prove a point. Every species in the galaxy thinks they know humanity's limitations. They think they've got us figured out. Lucky, reckless, blessed by improbable circumstances. I'm going to show them something different. I'm going to show them that humans succeed not despite the odds, but because we understand them better than anyone else. Harper looked up from her slate, eyes gleaming. You're not just trying to run successful cargo operations. You're trying to change how people think about humans entirely. Someone has to. We've been in galactic society for barely a century. Everyone still sees us as the new kids, the lucky survivors, the species that shouldn't exist, but somehow does. Maybe it's time we reshape that narrative. Show them that human success isn't luck or cosmic manipulation. It's mathematics, preparation, and the willingness to bet everything on calculated risks. By flying through a radiation nebula that kills most ships that attempt it, Vorkath said flatly. Exactly. Because if we succeed, if we make that route reliable, it won't be luck. It'll be skill, engineering, and precise execution. It'll be proof that humans can calculate risks better than the mathematical models predict. And once we prove it there, we prove it everywhere. Every supposedly impossible route, every contract that's too dangerous, every opportunity that everyone else thinks is too risky. We take them, we succeed, and we force the galaxy to recalculate what humans are actually capable of. The cargo bay fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of shared purpose. Three beings from different species, brought together by a card game and held together by mutual need and complementary skills. It shouldn't work. The probability of this crew functioning effectively was low. But then again, probability was clearly something humans approached differently. I'll start the weapon system inventory, Vorkath said finally. If we're flying through the Thornback, we might encounter pirates. The nebula's radiation makes it perfect for ambushes. They hide in the dead zones where sensors don't work. Wait for damaged ships to stumble by. Good thinking. Harper, prioritize shield upgrades but make sure our weapons are functional. I'd rather avoid combat, but I want options if it finds us. On it, boss. As they dispersed to their tasks, Reyna stood alone in the cargo bay for a moment, looking at the ship she had won. The Decimator, a name that spoke of violence and domination. Maybe she'd change it eventually, give it something more appropriate for a vessel that was going to redefine possibility. Or maybe she'd keep it. A reminder that sometimes you take what the universe gives you and make it into something nobody expected. Her communicator chimed. A message from Meridian Trading, confirming the test contract. 3 tons of low-value industrial components. Delivery required within 10 days. Payment on completion. Insurance waiver required due to high-risk route. Standard terms for an impossible job. Perfect. She sent back confirmation, then pulled up the stellar cartography data for the Thornback Nebula. The maps were incomplete, compiled from the few ships that had survived the crossing. Radiation pockets marked in angry red, debris fields in cautionary yellow, safe corridors, theoretical only, traced in optimistic blue. The odds of success were terrible. The potential rewards were enormous. And somewhere between those two facts lived the space where humans operated best. Reyna Cross smiled, closed the data slate, and went to help her new crew prepare for the impossible. Because that's what humans did. They looked at the word impossible, broke it down into component risks, calculated the actual odds, prepared as thoroughly as possible, and then attempted it anyway. And sometimes, often enough to matter, they succeeded. Not through luck, not through probability manipulation, but through the simple, stubborn refusal to accept that long odds meant no chance. The universe was vast and dangerous and filled with species that had been exploring it for millennia before humans even discovered fire. But humans had something those older, wiser species had forgotten or never learned. They had audacity, the willingness to look at mathematics that said failure and ask, but what if we succeed? 2 days later, the Decimator undocked from Station Helix 9 and set course for the Thornback Nebula. On board, a human captain, a Klendari first officer, and a human engineer worked in harmony that shouldn't exist, but did. Behind them, the station's observers watched and wondered and calculated odds. Ahead of them, the nebula waited, indifferent to probability and predictions, just physics and radiation and danger. Exactly the kind of challenge that humans loved best. And as the ship accelerated toward what most species considered certain death, Reyna Cross sat in the captain's chair and reviewed her calculations one final time. The odds were still terrible. The risks were still enormous. But the universe didn't care about fear. It only cared about physics. And physics, properly understood and carefully managed, could be survived. Probably. Maybe. The impossible was just the probable that hadn't happened yet. Time to make it happen.